In an effort to campaign on both the migrant crisis and violent crime, former President Donald Trump appeared on a local Fox affiliate in Detroit and confidently declared that Venezuela was very crime-ridden. They announced the other day a 72% reduction in crime. You wanna know why? They moved all the criminals from Venezuela right into the good old USA. That's what Trump claimed. But the anchor, Roop Raj, wasn't buying it and luckily asked for receipts saying, quote, "But sir, where are those numbers coming from?" Trump obviously didn't expect that follow-up and kind of flailed in response saying, I guess I get them from the papers. In this case, I think it's a federal statement. Not only is it absurd and false to claim that Venezuela has some sort of government program to empty its prisons and send their criminals to the United States, Trump would also be incorrect if he did in fact get this information from the papers or from a federal statement, because they're both wrong as well. In fact, most of our news media relies heavily on one of the most incomplete and inaccurate crime reports, as Jake Tapper did just yesterday.
He talks about surging crime rates, how horrible the crime rate is, and look, any crime is horrible. But your reporter notes that the FBI statistic shows a 13% drop in homicides in 2023. Trump responds, the FBI gave fake numbers. I don't believe it. No, it's a lie. It's fake news.
Look, while it is absolutely true that the right wing likes to fearmonger about crime for campaigning purposes, Trump is actually kind of right in dismissing the FBI numbers, as did The Appeal, which is a news site focused on pushing criminal justice reform. According to their website, The Appeal is a nonprofit news organization that envisions a world in which systems of support and care, not punishment, create public safety. All right, you familiarized yourself with The Appeal, not a right-wing organization, but they put out a report just last October, highlighting all the issues with FBI crime reporting and just how incomplete it really is. First, it's worth bearing in mind that a lot of crime goes unreported by victims. Surveys conducted by the Bureau of Justice Statistics suggest that more than 50% of violent crimes and around 70% of property crimes are never reported to police. For certain types of offenses, such as sexual assault, upwards of 75% of incidents may never be officially documented. Another pro-criminal justice reform organization called the Marshall Project put out a similar report stating that around half of all crimes, both property and violent, never get reported to the authorities. The Department of Justice collects crime statistics in two separate ways, okay? We've talked about this on the show before. I'm gonna reiterate again how this data is collected. So they do it through the FBI's crime reporting program and the Bureau of Justice Statistics crime victimization survey, where they literally survey Americans about their experiences with crime. And that tends to have a more holistic look into the crime that people are experiencing, the crime that occurs in their communities, with the exception of homicide rates, because as we all know, you can't really survey someone who's been killed in a homicide. Now, while the FBI tries to collect crime data directly from more than 18,000 police agencies through its Uniform Crime Reporting Program, the National Crime Victimization Survey, NCVS, interviews 150,000 families across the country. The NCVS asks questions that capture crimes that were not reported to police, as well as ones that were.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth, as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
So that survey tends to be more accurate since it finds instances of crime that were never reported. In other words, when you compare the numbers to the FBI's report, which collects the data from the police agencies, well, you see this major disparity between the survey and the FBI's data, okay? Now, the Justice Department's crime victimization survey shows millions of violent and property crimes were never reported to the police, often because the victim reported the incident to another authority like a school official, or because they don't think police would take the matter seriously. Some crimes that are reported to the police never end up in the police report and would not be counted by the FBI's crime stats. Now let's pause there for a second because there's some other issues as well. Now keep in mind the police agency, not all police agencies are willing to cooperate with the FBI, meaning that they never provide the data for their department, so they're not included in the statistics to begin with. There's also an issue with the self-reporting coming from the police. Now, police can manipulate data from their own departments in either way. They could manipulate it to make it seem as though crime is lower in their jurisdiction, so they're not held accountable for failing to improve crime in their jurisdiction. Or they might want to make a point by manipulating the numbers and making it seem like crime is higher because they want to make a point about how the department needs more resources. The problem is the FBI does not audit the local police departments submitting this data unless the local police departments submitting the data ask for an audit, which, why would they do that? Now, things actually got a lot worse beginning in 2021, as the Marshall Project also notes, because the way in which the FBI collects data changed, and some law enforcement agencies were slow to adapt to the new system. The Marshall Project notes that nearly 40% of law enforcement agencies around the country did not submit any data in 2021 to a newly revised FBI crime statistics collection program, leaving a massive gap in the information that was collected, a massive gap in the data. In an effort to fully modernize the system, the FBI stopped taking data from the old summary system and only accepted data through the new system. Thousands of police agencies fell through the cracks because they didn't catch up with the changes on time. More than 6,000 law enforcement agencies were missing from the FBI's national crime data in 2022, representing nearly 1/3 of the nation's 18,000 police agencies. This means a quarter of the US population was not represented in the federal crime data. Reporting actually did improve a little bit the following year, with an additional 2,000 agencies submitting their crime reports. That's a good thing, but that means that 4,000 of them still had not, meaning the FBI's data was still incomplete. The two largest police agencies in the US, the New York Police Department and the Los Angeles Police Department, are still missing in the federal data. Politicians like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis take full advantage of the incomplete data to declare that, look at what I did. Crime rates are down in my state. I'm such a winner, I'm such a great leader, but less than 10% of agencies were included in their 2022 FBI crime report. Of course, the left also relies heavily on this inaccurate data for its own purposes.
Crime may be up in your neighborhood, but that's not what's happening nationally.
It's kind of the equivalent to, remember when Senator Inhofe brought the snowball onto the Senate floor to say, hey, climate change isn't happening, look at this snowball.
Right, I can look out my window and see that it's cold, and now I know climate change is not happening.
So if you can conceptualize of trends, statistical trends as it relates to climate change, you can conceptualize of trends as it relates to crime, and maybe just try to get over some of your preconceived notions about certain kinds of people in order to get there and put that in the recycling bin.
All right, look, I don't know if climate change is a great analogy here because unlike our rapidly warming planet, which leads to extreme weather events and of course rising sea levels that impact everyone living on said planet, crime spikes in cities impact those living in the cities. Honestly, who cares about the national data, especially if it's concealing the clusters of crime spikes in the country? It's as dishonest as pointing to national polling for the general election rather than focusing on the swing states that ultimately decide the election. And of course, it's incredibly insulting to those worried about crime in their communities, in their areas, by painting them as hysterical lunatics who base their views on anecdotes. City-specific trends exist. and they tend to be more accurate than the FBI's incomplete national report. Let's check in on Los Angeles, shall we? Let's take a look at this. Murder rates dropping across the country, that's good, but not in Los Angeles. That's bad. Is it okay to say that, or is that ignorant propaganda that doesn't focus enough on the inaccurate FBI stats that keep getting tossed around as the holy grail of data? Data from the Los Angeles Police Department shows, as of mid-March, the murder rate had climbed to about 30% above the same period in 2023, and the number of people shot, comprising both murders and people who survived shootings, also crept above early 2023 numbers. LAPD Chief Dominique Choi told the Board of Police Commissioners this week that since mid-March, the 30% increase had dropped to about 9.3%, with the city recording 81 murders compared with 74 during the same period in 2023. So obviously, the number of people getting shot, the number of homicides is a problem, specifically in Los Angeles. In other parts of California, like in Oakland and San Francisco, other forms of crime have seen a spike. Homicides are low in San Francisco, but property crime is through the roof. Washington, D.C. has an issue with carjackings, something Detroit has managed to decrease by actually hiring more cops while reforming policing overall, something that we should have done from the very beginning. Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan said in 2013 the city had the highest homicide rate in the nation and was known nationally as Carjack City, with 782 carjackings that year. Then Police Chief James Craig was nearly carjacked in an unmarked car. But since then, the mayor said that the city has hiked officers' pay to make it competitive with other cities and hired 230 more officers in 2023. Duggan said homicides have dropped from 386 in 2012 to 252 in 2013, the fewest since 1966. Look, different jurisdictions have varying laws and respond to crime in different ways. So again, focusing on federal data, especially when it's deeply flawed to begin with, is useless in both living in a fact-based reality and addressing crime in specific locations. So in sum, please don't be a sucker and don't cite FBI crime reports. Find city-specific crime trends that apply to you, and don't let anyone gaslight you about what's happening in your neck of the woods, because their political agenda is more important to them than your safety is.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below, because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.